Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Today, I wanted to talk about the really early meta in patch 0.5.0, what is shining on day one. The patch has been live for a day, and it's time to take a bit of a look at the early top performing builds of the league. Now, this is for those of you that had to start the league late, those of you who started didn't work out, or maybe it was working fine, but you just found you didn't find the playstyle very fun. Whatever the case, if you're looking for inspiration for a new build, this video is for you. Now, before the league, there was a lot of discussion going around about attack builds suffering a lot as a result of the nerf that took place to essences. This hasn't turned out so far to be a very big deal. Attack builds are doing just fine, even though their early endgame weapons are worse than what they were able to get access to at a comparable time in 0.4.0. But I do think it's worth pointing out that Poison Burst Arrows nerfs have had a really big impact. One of the most popular builds of last league, not many people are playing at this league. It's not that the build was actually completely and utterly gutted by those nerfs, it's still a functioning build, it's just that a lot of people have moved on from it and tried something else instead. One thing I do need to talk about though, there have been a lot of complaints about lag this league, and I wanted to talk about something that's been helping me with it. I turn down almost all offers that I get from companies that want to use my channel to promote a product, and I have to be won over by that product before I'll even consider it. That's why I don't take the much better money that market-leading mobile games offer. But I played Path of Exile 1 and 2, and I had a lot of problems in the Mirage League. I found a service that actually helped with that. Sadly, a bit too late in that league cycle for me to stream much during that league. What was happening? I kept getting 2-second plus lag spikes, disrupting the connection from my ISP to the Australian game server. And other servers were even worse than the Australian one. So I tried connecting to the Singapore one, and it was even worse. What was happening there was that my ISP would keep changing the routing on me every time there was a bit of a traffic lull. When it reconnects, data packets take a longer route back. Suddenly, boom, there's a huge lag spike because it's taking much longer to get back than it took to get there. A half-second lag spike's annoying, 3-second is infuriating, and a 6-second one is a disconnect every time, the way that Path of Exile is coded. Now, my GearUP trial solved the problem. They optimized the routing so game data doesn't do the scenic tour of all Aussie ISPs on the way back. Less steps, lower ping, but most importantly, actually, it's a more stable ping. I have not seen over 30 milliseconds once since I signed up with GearUP. Basically, the worst frames I have now are about as good as the best frames I used to get. Now, if you play other games, they do also support pretty much all live service games as well. So next gaming session, pay attention to the number of times you curse lag. If it's even one, give GearUP a try. If you use the promo code that is down in the pinned comment, just down below the video, and if you do so before the video is 48 hours old, I'll talk GearUP into giving you a month's Discord Nitro as well. Now, I want to talk about the methodology that we're using in this video. There's a few sources of lists of high-level characters. The most authoritative is Grinding Gear Games' ladder. This tracks the highest XP characters in each league. Now, in Path of Exile 1, it tracks 15,000 of them. In Path of Exile 2, it only tracks 1,000. So there's a bit less information that's available there. However, there's also a lot of people that are actively engaged in trade, and there's also a lot of people that opt in to displaying their character on websites like POE.ninja. POE.ninja then goes and scrapes the ladder and also uses all these other sources, and then lets us compare ascendancy choices, skills, support gems, and other sorts of major build choices, such as the keystones that people use, whether people focus on evasion, armor, energy shield as a defensive layer. And when I come back to this topic a couple of weeks into the league, I'm going to pay more attention to people's choices of armor pieces and the like. It's a bit different on day one, where people are more likely to use something that's not their dream armor base because it's just got such good explicit mods on it. It dropped off some boss that they killed and it's like fantastic compared to anything that's what they're really looking for. But later on, we'll be able to really drill into that in a much more detail. But for the moment, we can take a look at the major build choices that shape the way that their character is designed. For this video, I want to focus only on early league, trade league characters. Solo self-found and hardcore impose additional requirements on characters, but most importantly, solo self-found and hardcore tend to get off to a slower start. So their really early meta report is kind of better fit on day 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 than looking at it 32 hours into the league. It's worth noting that what we're looking at here is not a perfect measure of long-term build power. It overrepresents popular build guides in particular, but also just builds that are really easy to start as well. But it is very good at showing what players are actually choosing when the league is young, and by looking deeper, we can also look at some of the pain points that people experience. For example, one thing that I drilled into was having a look at just how many martial artists there are that are having trouble between level 50 and level 85. This is one of the Ascendancies where the play fall off is really high, from level 50 to 70, and again from 70 to 85. What this indicates to me is that lots of people are experimenting with something new, and that not many people have solved all of the best ways to go from level 50 to level 85 smoothly on that class. That's quite different if you were to take a look at something like the Spirit Walker, where there's been a lot of builds that have done really explosively well getting to 50, but then also getting from 50 to 70, and then also from 70 to 85. So we really need to start by talking about the two Ascendancies that were added this league. The first one is the Martial Artist. This one is shiny and new, and a lot of people feel it just differs from everything else on offer by a bit more than everything else that's available. So for this reason, this has had the highest play rate at lower character levels. It's very strong early on in the game as well, and that's led people to really, really, really enjoy playing it. There's also a lot to discover. So a lot of people will play because they want to get to the end game as quickly as possible. But there's also a lot of people that aren't really fussed about that, and they'd rather enjoy the journey. And there's certainly a lot to discover with the Martial Artist. You might be the first person to discover a particular interaction. That's certainly appealing to a lot of people too. However, it's worth noting that by level 65, the Martial Artist starts to fall off, and it's in third place. This leaves me a bit concerned that it might be struggling a bit with the higher damage that's dealt by interlude monsters. Not just necessarily that damage, but the fact that they need to balance so many different things on items. So you're going to need to get yourself a whole bunch of attributes. You're going to still need the same elemental resistance as everyone wants, but because a lot of these people are at least experimenting with Hollow Palm technique, they probably also need to get evasion and energy shield as well on their gear. And this just puts quite a lot more pressures on gear than you might be finding if you're playing something that might just need to, for instance, get those attributes and also get those resistances, but that doesn't really require stacking local defenses as well. It's very much a solvable problem, and 102 of the 1423 players that made it to level 85 or higher on day one were martial artists. But it's worth noting that that's only 1.25% of the martial artists that made it to level 50. By contrast, if you look at the Spirit Walker, 8% of the people POE.ninja that tracks that reached level 50 also made it to level 85 plus. So the Spirit Walker is pushing a lot more people a lot further ahead. Secondly, we have the Spirit Walker, and we just mentioned it there at the end. This is shiny and new, but it's also performing really well. And that, I think, is because there is a particular build we'll get to when we start looking at the top performing builds that is really, really, really well suited to this new Ascendancy. It's a bit less popular at lower levels than the Martial Artist is, but it is still one of the most popular Ascendancies there, as is to be expected for something brand new, something you could not play in 040, but it is an absolute star performer when we're looking at high level. Next up, I wanted to take a look at the types of builds that people are playing here. Some of the sort of build diversity, skill diversity that exists out there. I actually think the best way to categorize this in Path of Exile 2 is quite different to what it is in Path of Exile 1. In Path of Exile 1, claw builds, dagger builds, sword builds, axe builds, they can all look pretty similar on a lot of lines. However, in Path of Exile 2, the weapon that you use is really defining upon the sorts of skills that you're going to find synergies with. Now, there's the exception of staves and wands. They're basically the same as each other. Casters can use either, but for pretty much every other slot, there's a pretty clear selection of skills that they work best with. Now, also this pie chart, as well as the next one, you'll notice that they're slightly distorted. That's deliberate, otherwise you can't read the ones that are around 1%. So these are deliberately expanded, and some of that has been taken from some of the other ones. Now, spear, top position, 28.5%. Bow and quiver, 18.5%. Distant second. Close third, crossbow, 15.2%. Distant fourth, quarterstaff, 11.5%. These four add up to 3/4 of the meta, give or take just a smidgen. So the vast majority of players are playing one of these four weapon types. After this, we have the scepters, 6.9%, almost all minion builds. The staff and wand, this is a mixture of casters. There's not just one definite build there. Then we have the talismans, which are the druids that shapeshift. Then we have the one-handed mace and unarmed builds. And we have a sliver that is too small to show for two-handed maces. Deliberately left that one off, but it's only 0.5%, so it would only be a few pixels high. Two-handed maces, maybe not the most popular build in Path of Exile 2. That is the weapon selections people are using day one of patch 0.5.0. Jumping over though, we'll take a look at the Ascendancy Split as well, and then we'll have a look at how these intersect by taking a look at some of the top performing individual builds. Ascendancy choice, and again, this pie chart is deliberately a bit distorted because otherwise there is no way you'd be able to read these thin slices, but 21.4% of you are playing Spirit Walkers, 20.8% of you are playing Deadeyes. These are actually intentionally slightly underrepresented on this chart, so they're actually a bit bigger than this. Again, that's so that you can read all of the smaller ones. Then 17.5% of you are playing Martial Artists. This is at level 70. It is, again, different if you look at different levels. The Tactician is next, 6.1%, taking up the most popular slot for those of you that are playing around with Crossbows, but this is less defined by a single build and less tied to a single build than some of the others. Disciple of Arashtra is next, 4.7%. Then we have the Lich, the Witch Hunter, the Amazon, the Infernalist, the Oracle, the Titan, the Gemling Legionnaire, the Stormweaver, Blood Mage, Warbringer, Ritualist, Shaman, Chronomancer, Smith of Kitava, Invoker, Pathfinder, and the poor Acolyte Chayula coming in last. Interesting to note there that a number of the Ascendancies that got substantial reworks, the Chronomancer, 0.7%, and the Acolyte Chayula in dead last, 0.5%. Remember, this is deliberately widened so you can read it. If I was to do this properly, that would actually be thinner still. Those have not gained much popularity out of these changes. It will be interesting though to see what people manage to do with these new versions of these Ascendancies, especially once a bit more testing has been done and a bit more optimization around some of the new options that the Acolyte Chayula has gained. Let's jump in now to take a look at some of the most defining builds so far really early in this league. Now this again is going to be those builds that have defined the league for those of you that have gotten to high level already. Firstly, we have the Whirling / Twister build. Now this has been a top performer for two reasons. Partly it's because it's good, but also because it was really hyped. This has carried 2,716 players to level 70 or above, but interestingly, 480 of those have also reached level 85 plus, so that's quite some percentage there. It's mostly being played on the Spirit Walker, occasionally being played on the Martial Artist and Deadeye, and it absolutely always is required to use a spear. So that's the Whirling / and Twister build. The second top performer has been Ice Shot and Snipe. Now, this one's interesting in that it is played on a single Ascendancy. This is a close second performer, and again, it's a combination of power and hype. 2,032 players are level 70 or above, 244 of those are level 85 plus. You'll notice here that of the people that have made it to level 70, a smaller percentage of them have made it to 85 plus than was the case for the Twister and Whirling / builds. And this build is almost exclusively played on the Deadeye Ascendancy, very specifically on the Deadeye, because you just really can't beat Endless Munitions and Point Blank. Those two Ascendancy notables are probably worth more than any other entire Ascendancy to this particular archetype. The third most popular build has been the Grenade Crossbow build. A distant third place performer, 1,089 players have reached level 70 plus, and 169 of those have reached 85 plus. What's interesting here though, is that of the people that have made it to 70, a big percentage have actually pushed further to 85. So it's about 1 in 6 of them that have pushed to 85 as well. That's comparable to the Whirling / Twister builds, and it's noticeably ahead of when we looked at the same metric for the Ice Shot and Snipe builds. This one had a lot less hype going into the league, but it was a well-known power starter and something that people had played for a while and really solidified how to make progression on it. It's played on many Ascendancies, unlike the previous two options. The Witch Hunter is the most popular, but it's still less than half of the people playing this. The other popular Ascendancies are the Gemling Legionnaire, the Deadeye, the Tactician, and the Amazon, but there's also other ones that people experiment with quite a bit as well. So there's quite a variety of play styles for this setup. And following this, we have the category of martial artists that don't fit into one of the 3 previous builds. This is a category I want to look at because it's a big group of players, even though it's not one single build. So of the remaining martial artists, the ones that are not playing Whirling / Twisters, because quite a lot of you are, players are continuing to experiment with a lot of different possible outlines as to how they could build their character, and this experimentation process is slowing them down. So 1,616 martial artists have reached level 70 plus, again, not counting anyone that's already been mentioned in the last 3 categories. And of those, only 60 have reached level 85 plus. Now, if we were to take a look at the percentage of people playing grenade builds, where it's about 1 in 6, and if we were to extrapolate that to martial artists, you'd expect 265, 270 level 85 plus characters. So something's very different there. And I think this is just the fact that people have worked out how to progress this quickly on established builds, but for the martial artist, people are just experimenting, working things out. Additionally, there's also a factor where the martial artist, as something that's brand new, it attracts the players that are a bit more willing to take a risk on something new and more willing to just enjoy the journey rather than being laser focused on reaching the destination as quickly as possible. So those players are playing something that is unique rather than something that is a proven performer that they're copying, and they're having more fun that way. So of course, it's the right way for them to play. But that's something to keep in mind. That's the reason the martial artist hasn't yet resulted in fantastic results, except for those of you that are playing the Twister Whirling Slash build. After this, we have the plant mages. Now, this is the build that I'm playing myself. You'll notice that this is a much smaller category of the player base than any of the ones we've looked at so far. There is quite a big jump down from the 4th most popular archetype to the 5th, and really the 4th is an amalgam of quite a lot. But the plant mages are physical spellcasters. These are builds that use Entangle, Thrashing Vines, and Thunderstorm, amongst other skills, in order to do physical damage to multiple targets simultaneously. They may or may not also use Bone Storm as a way to deal massive damage to particular bosses. Now, the most popular ascendancy for this is the Lich, but most of those Liches aspire to respec into being an Abyssal Lich late at endgame. It's also played quite a bit on the Oracle, and last league it was very popular on the Disciple of Varashta as well. Disciple of Varashta Plant Mage was the most popular setup for hardcore solo self-found players in last league. So do keep that one in mind. It is something that has definitely got some proven potential, but it's not something that's leading a lot of people to explosive starts. It is, however, leading people to solid ones. 424 of you that are level 70 plus, 48 of them are level 85 plus, which isn't quite the 1 in 6 that the grenade builds are getting to level 85, but it is a pretty good percentage of them. And I'll finish off by saying thanks again to today's video sponsor GearUP. Link down in the pinned comment for my promo code over if you want to give them a try. But I tried them out in Path of Exile 1 Mirage League after just losing too much XP to network spikes, and as a result, just getting more and more frustrated at various times, especially during a really fun league like Mirage was. I turned down sponsors that offer more money to peddle junk, but GearUp has worked for me. That's why my only hesitation in recommending them is that now that you know that I use them, every time you see my character die on stream, you'll know that it's entirely my fault, and not the fault of data packets taking the scenic route all across Australia or all across whatever country you happen to live in. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have interesting results.